Well, today's my last sermon for a few weeks. I'm going to conclude the series that I started. We had a good time last weekend. We were Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, 75 degrees. It was really nice. So we enjoyed that. The wind was hard and heavy, but wind was bad enough that they closed down some of the roads up through the park and stuff. But anyway, it was a nice time to be away. Thank you for that. And we enjoyed it very much. Today I want to conclude the series, and it's been a kind of a different series, but I want to think about our conclusion. I want you to think in regards to rising to a conclusion. Now, that sounds like an odd statement, but every one of us is going to bring life to a conclusion at some point. It's going to be done. And we need to rise to that challenge of how we're going to do that. From start to finish. From start to finish, God knows. Life is one incredible journey. It's an incredible journey. Sometimes our journey is fantastic. It's filled with excitement, with joy, with happiness. Every one of us can relate to that at some point or another. And sometimes our journey is troublesome, filled with disappointment, heartbreak, and unhappiness. If you wanted to, you could probably look back across your life and chart your journey. You could see where your journey has taken you. You could look back and see how certain events or actions had started a new chapter in your life, or you could see how it's caused you to go in a new direction, whatever it might be. Now, the most fascinating thing about our journey is that God knows and has been there from the start. And He's going to be there to the end. Jeremiah 1, chapter 1, verse 5, first part says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." He knew us before we ever started. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." So God knows our plans. He has plans for us. So today I want you to think about the journey. I'm going to take you on a journey through your life. I'm going to do my best to do that anyway. I've broken it down into 4 areas. You can break your life down into many areas, I'm sure, but there's 4 major ones that I want us to look at today. We'll each be able to identify which section, which stage of life that we're in. And some of us are going to be able to look back and say, been there, done that for all of them, because we're going to see that we're in all stages. The first stage of that journey is our childhood, our youth. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11 will say, "When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me." I talked, I thought, and I reasoned like a child. You ever hear anyone say, which I know you have, that, we just didn't realize how good we had it whenever we was at home? You ever feel that way? Man, you look back and mom and dad's taking care of the bills. What little money you've been able to earn, you can put in your pocket probably. Now, I know there's exceptions to the rule, but as a kid, I didn't have to worry about the food on the table. It seems that every time I sat down, there was food on the table. And I didn't have to worry about how it was going to get there. I didn't have to worry about that roof over our head. Now, whenever I was a kid, you got to remember, I grew up in the country, way out in the country. We didn't have indoor plumbing for a few years. Does anyone else remember that? Well, 1 or 2 of you, so some of you are from the country as well. We didn't have indoor plumbing. I didn't have a roof over my head, but I've been under that old house more than I ever cared to be. Because when we put indoor plumbing in, my dad wouldn't get underneath the house, so he'd give me a pipe and say, "Go connect this to this," and I'd crawl underneath that. And now I can't do that. So now I give it to Mikey and say, "Could you do this?" It's a father-son thing. We pass it down. But I didn't have to worry about food on the table or shelter. Didn't have to worry about the clothes I was going to wear too much. Now, at our house, things weren't always easy, and Christmas was our big time. We had such a big Christmas, but I didn't get new school clothes to start school. That was gifts underneath the Christmas tree about halfway through the year. And that was all included, so that it looked like we had this fantastic Christmas. Never had to worry about that stuff. Probably had some chores and responsibilities, but for the most part, it was a pretty carefree life. Do you all remember that? Remember how that was when Mom and Dad were taking care of things? We really didn't realize how good that we had it. But even in our youth, God has plans for our lives. Psalm 71 verse 17 will say this: "Since my youth, God, you have taught me, and to this day I declare your marvelous deeds." In our youth, God has plans. Since my youth, you have taught me. Now let's stop there for a minute. I want each of you, everyone here can go back to that first category, that first stage. I want each of you to take a moment and think about your youth. What lessons or introductions to God do you remember from the days of your youth? Sometimes we just take all this stuff for granted. I want all of you to go back to those days of youthful years when Mom and Dad were still overseeing stuff. What introduction did you get to God? Because it says, "Since my youth, God, you have taught me." So whenever I was a kid, God started teaching me things that I needed to know. And each one of us should be able to identify something from our youth. Church kids might identify with a Sunday school teacher or something that they did as a kid. Rob identified with his granddad, and I appreciate that. A.C. Courtney was one of my favorite people. I got to tell you, I loved A.C. Courtney. That was his grandpa. And I enjoyed him so very much. I told him the story. I'll tell you the story. Whenever we were 24 years old, whenever we were called to the ministry here at Latonia Christian. And we were living in Illinois, had a church there. We had moved back from a church in the north to a church in southern Illinois because my dad was ill, and we went back to help take care of him. And that old country church had done so well, and we were up to 150, something like that. We was having a good ministry there. Closest house was a mile, but we were having a good ministry there, and all was going well. But I was ready to move on. That would have been my Grandma Pickles church. So we applied here. And we heard. I was surprised. I was 24 years old, and a church of 200 at that time was a big church back in the 70s. So we applied here, and they contacted us. We were shocked, but they contacted us. A.C. Courtney was our contact. So we had communicated back and forth, and all was going pretty well. And it was a bad winter. Remember the winter when the river froze over? Well, that's when they brought us over here. So, but it was a bad winter even in Illinois. And one of the elders of that old country church was in a real bad car wreck. It was a terrible car wreck. Didn't know if he was going to live or die. And so I called AC and said, I can't make it. We're supposed to come the end of December. I can't make it. Been a car wreck. One of my elders. He said, "Son, you're young. This is a big opportunity for you." He said, "You need to consider coming on over." I said, "I really appreciate it, but no, I got to stay with this guy." He said, "Well, we may have to move on." I said, "Whatever you have to do, you have to do." And I stayed with the elder. By the way, he lived and did well. But about a month later, AC called me again and said, "That guy ever get better?" I said, "Well, by the way, he did." "Well, why haven't you called me?" I said, "I thought you were moving on." And he wasn't used to someone saying that to him. So the rest was history. They called and we come. And whenever we did, it was kind of interesting. That was when the river was frozen over and the picture of the Volkswagen out on the river. We could see that from our motel room. And Deb and I talked about it. We really liked it here. This is where we wanted to come. And we talked about it and said, "It's just too cold. We're not coming over here." Those were those two real bad winters. Well, we ended up here anyway. So for those days of our youth, what lessons did God teach you? Maybe it was an old elder. Maybe it was a Sunday school teacher. For all of you who grew up in church, there was probably something. Maybe it was a youth program. I've seen some wonderful youth programs where perhaps the star of the program. I remember one little program that we had back when we were young in Woodlawn, Illinois. One of the characters in the program, I can't even remember what the program was about, but he sat off to the side. He didn't want to remember that. He sat off to the side. He didn't want a major role. But his dad or someone had taught him to be busy, and everyone's focused on him to see what the kid's going to be doing. He had kind of stolen the show. kind of an interesting thing. So some of you who grew up in church, you may have some of those, or certain people that have touched your life. I have many of you who have told me about various ones that have worked in the back, ones that I knew from 40 years ago that worked in the back, and so they've touched your life. What about all the rest of us kids who didn't grow up in church? How did God speak to you? How did God speak to you that did not grow up in the church? One of the ways that I remember Him speaking to me was with nature. I used to love, I still do, I love the stars. To see the stars early in the morning or late at night. And as a kid, I was feeding cattle by 5 o'clock in the morning whenever I was 12, 13 years old. And the stars, man, you could just, and back in the country where you didn't have all the city lights, wow, stars are really bright and really fascinating. How did God speak to you? Maybe it was a difficulty. Maybe there was some difficulty in your family. And you just knew there had to be something more. And you become aware of God. Perhaps it was a divorce or a funeral or illness. Or maybe something really good had taken place. And you were introduced to God in your youth. Now, each one of you, whether you've identified it yet or not, everyone get this, each one of you, that took place. There's no exception to that rule. Every one of you in your youth was introduced to God some way or another. Maybe not in the formal approach that we think about today. But every one of you in your youth at some point or another had a thought about God. And you were introduced to Him. So the very first stage of our life is those youthful years. The second stage that we might look at is those young adult years. For most people, stage 2 is a very exciting time. A very exciting time. There's that newfound freedom. Now, by the time you're in your mid-teens to late teens, you may be a rebellious child. Deb was that way, I wasn't. But you may be a rebellious child, but by the time you're a young adult, you no longer have got mom and dad where they may still be giving you some instructions, but now it's not rebellion. I'm a young adult. I can make that decision. So we start seeing some of those changes take place, that newfound freedom. Or that job, you're out of high school now and you got a job and you're earning some money, or maybe you're on to more education. There's new adventures, there's marriage, there's responsibilities that are going to take place. Proverbs 20:29, it's on the screen for you. The glory of young men is their strength. Gray hair is the splendor of the old. Well, we don't need that part. The glory of young men is their strength. Whenever we're young, we have that attitude that we are invincible, that nothing can stop us. There's nothing that we can't do. That we're excited about it. We're looking forward to life. We're full of energy. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 through 33, we're not going to look at all of that, but verse 1 of 31. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and two will become one flesh. We will leave mom and dad in these years, those young adult years. We leave mom and dad and we set out on our own new adventure. Life is really busy. It's filled with hope and energy. Hope and energy. That anticipation of what's coming. Isaiah chapter 48 and verses 17 and 18 will say this. This is what the Lord says, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. I am the Lord your God who teaches you what is best for you, who directs you in the way you should go. If only you had paid attention to my commands, your peace would have been like a river, your well-being like the waves of the sea. Who directs you in the way you should go. Directs you in the way you should go. We're in those young adult years, and if we are interested, God will direct us. Just because you're young and strong and independent doesn't mean that He's not still trying to direct you in the way that you should go. I want you now to take a moment. We've done the youth. I want you now to take a moment of those young adult years. I want you to recall a time as a young adult that you really needed God. Every one of us have that time. As a young adult, when you really needed God and you realized that He was there. Maybe it was a heartbreak or a disappointment that you were going through. Maybe it was the joy of life itself. But all of a sudden there was a special time in your life. As a young adult, there's a lot of things that take place in our life. As a young adult, my Grandpa Sweeney died. Many of you may have gone through that with your grandparents. If you were close to your grandparents, that was one of those awakenings. Or maybe there was, for some of us as young adults, we had to deal with the death of someone from our high school, just 2 or 3 years out of high school. Boy, that was an awakening. That was tough. We had to deal with that a little bit, perhaps, in our youth. But now as a young adult, it's a whole new picture, a whole new concept that we're dealing at. Maybe as a young adult, that job has just not worked out, and you're really having financial struggles that, man, I had it made back home, and now I don't have it made. I'm having to figure out how to make everything work. We have some type of awakening at that time, and we realize that God has these plans for us, and He's still directing us. Do you ever think that maybe all of those things have transpired in your life so that God could get your attention, who directs you in the way that you should go? Most of us can look back at those early years of young adult, if we wanted to chart this, and see where God has kind of shifted us if we've led Him from this path to this path. Where God has shifted us to help us see His works more clearly. That we're able to see that God's still in control and still has a place for us. That there's still something about God that we need to know. Now, stage 3 is just your adult life. You're no longer young. You've kind of settled in. You got a regular routine. Every day looks like the one before it. It's just life. You get up and you have a little breakfast. You go to work. You come home, you have dinner. You watch a little bit of TV, and you go to bed. You get up, you go to work. Sounds just like the day before. No longer does 10 seem early. 10 is your new bedtime. You are anxious to watch the 6 o'clock news because you're not waiting on that 10 or 11 o'clock news. There's nothing that can happen the next 4 hours that I need to know. Anyone else there besides me? All right, so you kind of all know what I'm talking about. As I've looked at those stages into adulthood, I've realized getting old stinks. Most of you are there as well. It's just not what I thought it was going to be. That energy of the youth that we just had about young adults, where did that go? Your focus has changed from how am I going to afford a family and pay bills to maybe someday I'm going to get to retire. And the whole world is starting to change around me. Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21, that's the parable of the rich fool. Verse 19 will say this, "And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Has anyone reached that point? Probably not." So there we are. It looks like everything's good. We've got a little bit of savings. Everything's kind of working out. Yeah, right. That's what the parable of the rich fool is about. It doesn't always work out. Proverbs 19:21 will say, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." Now, each of you probably have plans. I remember meeting with a person not too long ago. They said, "Yep, we're going to be able to retire on this particular date." And they were making plans and anticipating it, and all of a sudden there was something take place in their family. And the next time I met with him, he said, "Mike, we're pushing that back a year." And the last time I met with him, he said, "I don't know if I'll ever get to retire." Life changes. Welcome to the real world. It's what God has planned that will prevail. God has plans for us, and His plans don't end just because we've got to be an adult. Now I want you to look back Many of you are in the same category as me. We're in category 4, by the way. But many of you can look back to category 3, how God was there for you when you needed Him. In category 3, here's kind of where we get to be as an adult. There may be some tough thing going on in your family, and everyone's looking to you. How are we going to do this? Or you and your spouse have sat down and said, how are we going to figure this out? You don't know what to do. You know, just because I got to be 50 years old didn't mean that I knew what to do. It meant that I was still learning. And you're sitting down and you're trying to figure it out. What are we going to do now? How are we going to handle this? Or maybe there's an illness with one of your children, and you're thinking, how far am I going to go with this? Am I willing to sacrifice my retirement to be able to help meet their needs? What do I have to do? You don't know what to do. So each one of you have secretly, at some point or another, lifted your voice in prayer, that urgent prayer. God, I need help. I need help. My mom's ill, my dad's died. I don't know what to do. You know, as an adult, in those adult years, whatever age bracket you want to put in that, many of us lose our parents. And whenever we do lose our parents in that adult age, everyone said, well, you're an adult. Did that make it hurt any less? No, not at all. It still hurts. And there'll be years down the road and it'll still hurt. But you were an adult. But now you've had to learn how to handle various things that you didn't think you'd ever have to handle. I never thought I'd have to handle taking care of some of their affairs. They were good at that. Let them handle it. Deb and I, we got that big house, and it was really nice when we were raising kids. And man, it's a wood frame. It's a lot of work. And I keep saying we need to move. She keeps saying you're going to die here. So it's not like she's giving me a lot of choice. I've just decided to go with it because I don't want to die earlier. If I ever die of unforeseen circumstances, somebody have me check for egg poisoning, okay? Just saying. But as long, if I go first, we'll live there till I go. If she goes first, the house is for sale tomorrow. But no one's ever thought you're going to have to get to those places where you're making those decisions. Now, the reason we have decided not to sell is we have 35 years worth of stuff crammed in that house that we have not gone through. God bless you, Mikey. Be a man of patience. There is Grandma and Grandpa's pickle stuff there, some of the Sweeney stuff there. Ooh, mercy. Those boxes I wouldn't touch. There may be things wrapped up inside there that you should not see. Yeah, we've all got it. See, as an adult, we never think we're going to have to deal with those things. But God still has plans for us. But it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. Stage 4. Older adult. Welcome to my world. And many of you. Like many of you, I can look back at the first 3 stages and wonder, where'd those days go? I don't know how those days got away from us. What happened to my strength? Man, I used to be the strongest guy around. Now, I look for little kids to move stuff. Come over here and move this thing. James 4 would say that we are a mist and then we'll vanish. I want you to know the mist is getting thinner. Psalms 90, Moses said that our years quickly pass and we fly away. Now, I don't know if you've read that, but that's kind of scary. 1, I don't know how to fly. And 2, if I did know how to fly, I'm too tired. So you're kind of thinking, what am I going to do? And the days have passed away quickly. Job chapter 8 verse 9 says, for we were born only yesterday and know nothing, and our days on earth are but a shadow. Man, it seems like yesterday. It seems like yesterday. Honestly, boy, I don't want to insult any of you old people, but this is not my favorite category. I like that being young and strong. Those were good days. This category has taken some adjustment. It's instead of having strength here, I have to have strength deep down to face every day. The Lord and I have gotten a lot closer, but it's because I'm getting closer to being to Him. We're getting closer every day. Now, I do look forward to that face-to-face with Christ my Savior, but I still have struggles here on earth. Just because I got old didn't mean the struggles went away. Even after all those years of training, I still have struggles. So what should we conclude about life's journey? We have these 4 stages, folks, and each one of you can identify your own stage. The conclusion is the main part of the sermon today. I want to encourage you, finish well. We can look at the 4 stages of life and see the blessings as well as the regrets. I can look back and see, wow, that was great. That was fantastic. And I can look back and see, Mike, what was you thinking? Just like you all can as well. There are changes that all of us would make, and there are some things that we wouldn't change. Job chapter 16, verse 22, only a few years will pass before I take the path of no return, the journey of no return. That's scary. The journey of no return. I can never be here again. That day is coming. You know, as much as I love being 17 in my head, I can never be there again here. I can hear, and I can hear. But the rest of me goes, what are you thinking? Just like many of you. That the path of no return. I can look back on the path. I can see where I've been. I can see what I've done. I've seen the mistakes that I've made. I've seen the victories that I've had. I can't relive those victories. I can remember them. I can't relive those defeats. I remember them, but I can't go back and change them. It's a part of who I've become. The journey of no return. Ecclesiastes 9:12. Moreover, no one knows when the hour will come, and that's all we need. You can read the rest of it. We don't know when our hour will come. So I've had 4 stages of preparation. I remember God introducing Himself to me in my youth. I remember the excitement of my young adult. I can remember how life got to be kind of a routine as an adult. Same stuff, different day. I can remember that. Now as an old person, I can see that I don't know when that hour is going to come. But I can see I need to take those first 3 stages and be prepared for what's coming. Philippians chapter 3, verses 12 through 14. Not that I have already obtained all this or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Press on. Finish well. Finish well. Through my 49 years of ministry, I've seen people who were fantastic in that young adult and in those adult years. Man, they were workers. They were on fire. They were doing great things. But they didn't finish well. They fizzled at the end. They fizzled at the end. We need to finish well. It's not a natural process. In Psalms 90, verses 8 through 12, Psalms 90 is the psalm that was written by Moses. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow. For they quickly pass away, and we fly away. If only we knew the power of your anger, your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Moses said, we finish with a moan. As we get to be an older adult, things aren't as easy. Physically, it's not as easy. Sometimes life's just exhausting. It says that life is a span, but of trouble and sorrow. And as I look back over life, I can remember the troubles, I can remember the sorrows. But I also remember the very good things as well. That we finish with a moan. But folks, the most important thing is to finish with God. No matter how tough it gets. No matter how tough your life is. No matter how tough it is in your marriage, no matter how tough it is in your physical well-being, no matter how tough it is for your spouse's health, no matter how tough it is with your children, no matter how tough it is in your job, finish with the Lord. Put a strength in Him. Put a confidence in Him. To conclude well. But I want to conclude my life to the best of my ability. That I want to be the person. I've walked the last 49 years with God. I want to walk to the end with Him. I want to be there when He says, well done. I want to be there whenever He reaches the hand and says, step on over, step on through. I don't want to be looking around thinking, did I miss this? I want to finish well. And I know most of you do as well. So to bring life to a good conclusion means that we learn from our stages of life. So don't forget how God introduced Himself to you. I think some of you have. I want you to just really look back and work it out. Maybe it was Grandma Pickle. I've got a picture of my Grandpa Pickle that has always been a treasure to me, sitting in a rocking chair on an old wooden rocker, his Bible open on his lap, looking into it, studying his Sunday school lesson. This was his last picture. It's a treasure, you know. You look back at these things and you think, where did God speak to me? And then as a young adult, whenever we've got all that strength and energy, and we think that we're in control, and we look around one day and find out, no, it wasn't me. Where did God speak to you? As an adult, whenever it looked like one day looked just like the rest of it, when did you hear God say, stay the course, stay the course, stay the course? And as an old person, and sometimes it's easy to say, oh, that hurts. Oh, that really hurts. Stay the course. Will you please stand as we have our invitation?